Good morning. My name is Libertas. That is the Latin word for liberty man. I'm an award-winning constitutional historian, and last week I did a seminar called Discipling the Nations that you can find on YouTube. But one of the students asked for me to explain the 17th Amendment. So I didn't have time to do it then. So here's the answer to your question, ma'am. Originally, the 17th Amendment reads, the Senate of the United States shall be composed of 2 senators from each state elected by the people thereof. Okay, so we don't need to get into the rest of it. Originally, it read this in Article 1, Section 3. The Senate of the United States shall be composed of 2 senators from each state chosen by the legislature thereof. For 6 years, each senator shall have 1 vote. So what they did with the 17th Amendment is they took the way the senators were chosen by the states. Originally, the senators for the states were chosen by the state legislatures. Now, they changed that over to the senators are chosen by the people themselves. That has been very destructive to the American system as originally founded. We don't understand what it means with what the genius of the what's the word I'm looking for? The separation of powers and the checks and balances. The checks and balance system. During the Constitutional Convention, there was a big fight over how to put this thing together so that they could stop tyranny at all different levels. The big states wanted the federal government officials to be elected by the population, by the people. The smaller states like Rhode Island, I believe that my county in the state of Mississippi has a bigger geographical area than the entire state of Rhode Island. So then you have Virginia, which back then included West Virginia as well, but it was huge in comparison to little Rhode Island. So, and then you had New York and Pennsylvania. Believe it or not, little Massachusetts had a huge population compared to most of the states. It was definitely in the top 4. So there was a lot of concern, and especially with Rhode Island, they refused to ratify the Constitution until after it was already in effect. And so they compromised at the convention to satisfy both sides. And the little states wanted representation to be by state because another little side note here so you can understand, a state like my state, Mississippi, is an independent and sovereign nation. The definition of state and nation is synonymous. A state or a nation is defined by a geographical border, a constitution, a form of government, and citizenship, which we have. I am a citizen of the state of Mississippi. I have laws and certain things here that I have to abide by as a citizen of Mississippi. Well, if I go to Louisiana, the way we do it in Mississippi is not the same as we do it in Louisiana. So I have got to honor what the rules are in Louisiana. A simple thing would be when I was younger, a lot younger, in Mississippi, you could buy beer at 18, but you had to be 21 before you could buy whiskey or hard liquors. Well, 20 minutes away was Louisiana. In Louisiana, you can buy everything at 18. I think now across the nationwide, you have to be 21 to buy any alcohol. But that's just a little side note on what it means for different states and different nations. Anyway, a state is designed by a geographical boundary, a constitutional government, and rights of citizenship. I can't vote in New York. I'm an American, but I'm not a New Yorker. Hopefully that makes sense. So with that in mind, the way they compromised it was that the citizens of each state would elect a representative to the House of Representatives based on the population of the state. Wyoming has such a small population that it only gets one representative in Congress. California's got a huge population and they get, I think, 53, maybe with the new census, that's going to change. But anyway, it's over 50 because of the number of people that live there. Well, to make it balance, checks and balances, to make it balanced, the founders in their wisdom said, okay, here's what we'll do. We will have a second chamber in the legislature called the Senate. And in that Senate, the members will be elected by the state legislatures because the senators are going to represent the individual states, and each state will have 2 votes. Now, you may think, well, what's the big deal? We live in a democracy. Well, we do not. We do not live in a democracy. We live in what is called a republic. A republic is where you elect people to represent you in the government. The founding fathers outright rejected democracy in any way, shape, or form, because then you have the tyranny of the majority, and the minority has no rights whatsoever. And in the example I just gave you, the voice of Rhode Island would have zero effect in the affairs of the country because it's so small. And they were afraid that 3 or 4 states would rule everything. Well, the Electoral College is a whole other subject that I'll cover, but it's along the exact same lines as this. So, and to understand the difference between a republic and a democracy, well, let's use this example. My nephew is got some of the brightest red hair that you'll ever want. So when we get together family reunions, nobody else in the family has got red hair. So they would pick on him and call him Ginger and all these different kind of things. So within that scenario, all the other little cousins could have voted and say, no gingers are allowed at the family reunion. Therefore, Nathan would not be allowed to come. That is a democracy. And you can just use that one little example to see that it's terrible way to govern anything. It works for maybe a social club or a Rotary Club to elect members or something like that, but not on a large scale or on a bigger, anything bigger than just a small little organization. So what's the big deal? What's the big deal? Republic, democracy, who cares? Well, it makes a huge difference. In 1869, a guy named Charles William Eliot became president of Harvard University. Charles William Eliot is known as the father of American progressivism. He's hailed by all the socialist and atheist groups. He's hailed by the liberals and especially the Democrat Party as being their mentor. So one of the things, the first thing he did when he became president at Harvard University, he says, we are no longer going to look to America for our ideas. We are going to become progressive and we are going to look to Europe. So he started changing the way words were used. He did a little paper on democracy versus republicanism. So he started changing the conversation about American government as not being a republic, but being a democracy. So now, over 169, almost 150 years ago, maybe 152 years ago, our conversation about our government is we use the word democracy, which people think just because the majority of the people want it, it's constitutional. It's just the way it is today because of this one guy. So what he did, and it took until 1913, took all the way from 1913 for the 17th Amendment to be changed or amended. And it has caused a world of trouble. And here's the genius behind the original reason for doing this. You want the senators to be chosen from a more educated, more wise group of people than the House of Representatives. The House of Representatives represent a certain segment of the population. They represent, in Mississippi, there are 4 congressional districts. So there are 4 different groups of people electing the representative, but he is the closest to the individual citizen. You can go and walk into his office. They would have offices all over the district, and you can walk in there and set up an appointment, and they'll meet with you. It's a lot easier to get a personal invitation with your representative than it is a senator from the state because of the numbers of people. So in their wisdom, they decided that the people in the state itself elect people to represent them. In theory, those people in the state legislatures are the brightest and the smartest people in that little district of the state. Mississippi, there's 122 representatives in our legislature, and yet we have less than 3 million people. There's more than 3 million people in the city of Houston and many other cities in America. So, but we have 122 representatives. So those people elect the smartest and the wisest that they can find that they want to represent them in the state, on the state level. And then the same thing with the Senate. The Senate in our state, the Senate represents a larger body, and there's only a body of citizens, and there's 52 of them. So you would think that with a broader group of people choosing them, you're going to get a smarter and wiser person out of the bunch. So anyway, it's like the cream of the crop rises to the top. So what they wanted to do with the US senators for the checks and balances and to make sure we don't have the tyranny of the majority, they wanted the brightest and the smartest people in the state to choose who was going to represent the state in Washington, D.C. So the state representatives have a scope. They represent the people. The state legislature chooses a senator to represent the state itself. And that state legislature held their senators to account for what they voted on. Basically, the state legislature would tell the Senate how to vote. If their senators, if they didn't vote the way the state legislature wanted them to vote, they would be immediately recalled. And the governor would choose a replacement until the appropriate time for another election. So what Charles William Eliot did with democracy, we're looking at 54 years later, that had gotten so ingrained in the legislature, in the way of thinking of the American people, they started thinking in terms of democracy and not republic. So now what happens is you get the same mentality of people choosing both houses in the US government. So that level of checks and balances was wiped out. So we are more of a democracy now than a republic of 50 independent and United Nations states. So hopefully that answers your question. Hopefully that enlightens you a little bit more on why we need to repeal this amendment, especially in our current situation where things are going in the country, because we do not have a democracy. We need to get that out of our conversation completely and go back to the original founding of America. And this is one of the most vital things that we need to do, is get back to the proper representation of the states as states, because the federal government is a child of the states. The states came first, federal government came second. Federal government is beholden to the will of the states themselves. So if we want to take our country back and we want to, quote unquote, make it great again, this is one of the first steps that we need to take. Amen. Hopefully you learned something. You can find us at libertyman.online. That's libertyman.online. Go there and you can see a few of my videos, but there's a whole lot more to come, and it's going to be a really great site. So see you in the future. And as always, remember, this is the sign of Liberty Man. It's Jesus's commandment. He says to love one another the way I loved you. So this is I love you in sign language. So we need to start seeing this all over the nation. When somebody's doing a political speech, they should close it with this, and you'll know then that they're Liberty Man and they understand what I just taught you. Anyway, God bless. Have a great day.